Hi, I'm Paul Roberts, and this is Conscious Counseling 101. Got an oldie but a goodie. Somebody that I know has asked me a question that so many people have asked. This is one of the few that I actually know. Actually, no, I don't know it. I have faith that I can understand and believe it. So I share it how I came to have that faith and how I believe it, so that you can too if you so choose. I don't know it. It's that old question, why do bad things happen to good people? I wouldn't ask this if I didn't value your opinion or perspective. I'm a Christian, and one of the questions I've wrestled with is why bad things happen to good people. I know it may be considered a somewhat cliche question, but through all the community volunteer work I do while costuming, I've really been humbled at seeing some of the struggles that people go through. And it just makes me wonder why. Why does a child get cancer? Why are there no reversible effects for certain handicaps and disabilities that affect people their whole lives? I've observed that many situations are beyond people's control. They didn't ask to have those unfortunate circumstances upon them, and they sure weren't looking for them either. This is one of those things that can be known. And of course, it's according to faith, okay? But I'm going to share with you how it can be known. It's in the Word. And why do so many people miss it? One of the things that helps this, I'm not saying it's going to help it, but it could help it if you were so inclined, if anybody was so inclined, is to read the entire Bible many times. Put all the words in your heart. Have everything that comes into your life be constantly filtered through, did this have any relevance to what I have read and had faith in and believe in? Is this of man? Is this of what the Word says? And if you do this throughout a large process of your life, what will happen is you'll start to see patterns. You'll start to say, well, I don't know, but if it was true and I believed, this would be accurate. You'll start to say, well, wow, this really represents what Jesus says about this, or the mentality of man, or the nature of man, or the love of money being the root of all evil. And you'll go back and you'll start to see, when you read the Old Testament and how God dealt with those people, and the New Testament beyond the Gospels, what happened after Jesus was here. And you'll realize the significance of Jesus being the cornerstone and the context of the whole Bible. And so many people that want to use the Bible just for their own means, and their worldly means, really, get it corrupted. And I'm talking, it even starts after the Gospels, while you still have the people after Jesus claiming in the name of the Holy Spirit and in the written Word and the inspired Word of God that this is what Jesus would now have us to do. Well, this is the thing, the beautiful thing of it is, if you believe in Jesus' teachings, you can go and correspond all through the Old Testament and all through the New Testament beyond him, and see whether or not what is being said, and even in our day and age right now, what's being said and shown by supposed men of God, supposed Christians, is accurate to what Jesus was teaching us. And we have to develop the tools, the perspectives of the whole in order to be able to do that substantially. Now, I developed perspectives that had to do with conscious light lifting, okay? Heightened conscious. Now, I equate it and label it as the same as the light of the world that shines, and that God gives us through Jesus and his teachings a way for us to heighten our intelligence and our conscious understanding. I equate that in a secular way so I can reach people and try to help. But we must understand, what is that made of? What are we standing on? What's the rock? We're standing on the Word. Now, we label it that. Maybe other people might label it some spiritual thing or some New Age thing or even a secular thing. It works in so many different religions and so many different cultures. But I label it with what I believe is the overall umbrella, the overall source. And it's not the Bible, and it's not the New Testament, and it's not God. It's Jesus' teachings, because he's the cornerstone. So we start there. We start there. It's so important. Now, I'm just going to give you a synopsis here. And if you'll study, don't listen to what I'm saying. You said you value my opinion. Don't value my opinion. Value my leadership to show you where to go, because we're not to call any man father or put our faith in man. We are only to serve our fellow brothers and help them. So my way of helping you is to show you where to look and why. You go look and see if this is true. Start off with the symbolic nature of the Garden of Eden. We don't know if there was ever an apple. We don't know if there was ever a Garden of Eden. We don't know if God said, here it is, this is where man starts. And boom, 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 one day after another, when there wasn't even a 24-hour period of time established, God created the world. This could be so that all men, poetically and symbolically, could understand these large concepts. There could have been evolution. There could have been dinosaurs. There could have been whole long periods of time. We don't know how long they are, because in our perspective, we put them in the limited ability for us to see in the terms that we have here now, that we're surrounded by, our limited sights and abilities to understand, our limited knowledge of all things in science. Even when it was written in 24-hour spans each day. And it has to be this way is because of obsessive compulsive people so worried and fearful that God's not in charge, that somehow they have to become in charge in order to force upon mankind the way to see things in their way. And consequently, what do they do by doing that? They abominate the word as they give it and help them and their ways of seeing, both united and individually, to be lifted. Humanism. We have Jesus speaking about it with the men of that day and age, praying loudly with the long prayer shawls in the courtyards, but whose insides are filled with dead men's bones like a whitewashed tomb, but that's filled with all decrepit things. We have those indicators within the cornerstone of Jesus' teachings. How do we apply those to life now, to the New Testament, after the Gospels, after Jesus? And how do we apply it to before? When God spoke to people, from Noah to Moses, it all started with Abraham. We don't have to believe those things, but if we did, and we gave it credit, we'd see how God related according to the Word. God related directly, but not directly. The only time directly was in the Garden of Eden. And even then, it wasn't completely directly, because when Eve looked around and Adam looked around, supposedly, couldn't see anything. I got a moment to do what I want to do. Okay? That's symbolically. That's poetry. Okay? All the rest of the time, up until Jesus, there was intermediaries, priests, people that could speak, that supposedly had seen, that were guidance people. This gave, once again, the ability to corrupt and distort and to hide. And what happened ultimately was man's purpose became served instead of God's, because it could be done. And even those high priests and all those men that were supposed to be doing the work for God, they had to have faith. They didn't know any more than I did. And so what they did was they started to make the things that are of man, that they have in their hands with their power, more important to them. And making the manifestation of that go on, and making that about all that it is, and distorting the words so that what they give to the people they're supposed to be leading start to corrupt them as well. These are the stumbling blocks that were created and shown in the Old Testament. Jesus came to address those stumbling blocks. He came to address his people and make sure that those that did not fall through the cracks or didn't wish to fall through the cracks were given ability to see. And others on the planet also saw what was able to be seen. And they wanted a part of it too, even though they weren't part of the chosen people. At that time, when everything was set in stone in the covenant with Abraham, you could have things, well, let me give it to you a really straightforward example. Like, let's say you get bit by a snake while you're in the wilderness, and it's a venomous snake. Because of the faith and the way things work, you could look up at the pole that was erected in different places in the camps that had a snake on it. It's the symbol for the medic alert bracelet nowadays. And because of your faith, by looking to that pole, you were healed. When Moses lifted up his staff or his arms, and he was standing with the Ark of the Covenant on the hills, and there were battles going on, and you looked up and you saw that, you had the faith that God was with us, and you would win that battle because you were the chosen people, and God would vanquish your enemies and allow what he promised to come true in reality. Now, there were, in the law, you can read about how there were people, even then, had different things happen to them that weren't going to be necessarily considered pure, even though they were righteous. Ability to give the sacrifice to be righteous, they were spoken for. So I'm not going to say everything just changed and now bad things happen to good people. What we call bad things happened to good people even then. But they weren't bad things. They were examples of all of the fallen man's godly allowed state, so that man could continue to learn from not only the failings of man, not only the leadership of man, not only the true light that shines down from God, but the real truth that is made evident to anybody that would search. And Jesus came for those people, even in that society. It was amazing that some of them just left their nets and their fields and just went after. And the man that wanted to wouldn't, because he said, "What must I do?" "Come follow me, leave your things, don't go back." He left, heavy-hearted. Jesus said, "I tell you the truth, the love of money is the root of all evil." What's happening today, and what's happened in the New Testament, even to the point at Antioch when they were first called Christians, is that once again, the factors that we can see in the Old Testament are starting to happen, become a part of what man subscribes to. Humanism, making man first, judging one another. Oh, my namesake, Paul, I could go on forever about him. You think he's great. He thinks he's not great. He boasts that he's not great, but he then also is great. And some of the things we learn from him, if not understood through the cornerstone, through the context of the entire Bible, can be misinterpreted and are causing so much of the problems we have now. And the problems we have now are a lack of perspective. Not, oh, these things didn't exist before, but now they do. It's a lack of perspective. Bad things always did happen to good people, but they weren't bad, and they're not bad now. This physical form that we have, where we put our treasures in and hold them dear to our hearts now, is nothing. It's going to fade away so fast it isn't funny. Those people, they have direct contact. That's their cross to bear. That's their daily bread. It's not a bad thing. It's a blessing for all of us to behold and for them to get their hands on and realize that God is right here. He's there. He's everywhere. And he gives us this for us to be drawn attention to the falling of man and to the limitations and vulnerabilities of flesh. It's a blessing that these things exist. Because when they're lifted away, whether it seems tragic or through pain and suffering like Job, we are able to see through the context of the cornerstone of the Bible and the fullness, if we are willing to look and abandon humanism and abandon our own objectives to stand and be tall and be a leader and let all people look and shine their face at us because the earth is all we really believe in. Instead, if we see the whole, we can see it for what it is. And no longer are we troubled by it. When I was young, when I was a small boy, I didn't like the idea that fires would come and ravage things. Now, my son's going to be a zoologist and an earth conservationist. And we go and study, and I get a little bit of his stuff that he learns trickles off onto me because we go places and see things and talk about things. And we realize that fire is a cleansing mechanism. The only thing that causes it to be bad is that there's death, or man put his house there, or there's community, or whatever. But other than that, if the world was left to be the way it is, it's nothing different than the tides, or the wind, or the rotation of the earth. The only thing that makes it bad is from our limited perspective thinking, oh no, those people were killed, those animals were killed, that environment was decimated, oh, that housing community was wiped out, a tornado struck down and everything. That's not bad. It is just a sign from God of our vulnerableness. And our vulnerableness is one of the keys to wisdom. And wisdom is said to be, the first steps to wisdom is to realize the fear of God. And by realizing the fear of God and the vulnerability of man, that causes one to have to reach out. What was Jesus' main message? Not to judge others, but to knock on the door, and the door will be answered. If you do that, and you don't look towards any other man's intervention in your ways that could trap you and encapsulate you, you will come to see these things. Only in faith, not in knowledge, just in faith. And your question will be answered. I'm Paul Roberts, and this is Conscious Counseling 101.